To help us look back on 50 years of Apple, we're joined by Ahmed Banafa, technology expert and professor at San Jose State. Ahmed, good to see you. When you look back at Apple's history, what does it mean for the company to have gone from startup in a garage to this tech giant and 5 decades later still be dominant in this space?
Good talking to you, Greg. It's actually history. We lived through that. People who are my age, they lived through the ups and downs of Apple. I look at it as an institution, no longer a company. When we talk about Apple, we are talking about, the challenges they face, Steve Jobs out, Steve Jobs in. When I moved to California in 1996, it's like 1 year before he came back and he simplified the company because the company was really in a bad shape. And then after that one, the company took off and became an consumer electronics company and never looked back. And here we go now, 50 years later.
Ahmed, on that note, Apple's driving force in the early days was about making devices personal, about bringing computers to more people, sort of democratizing the technology outside of their offices. Have they continued to succeed in that message of, in Tim Cook's words, thinking different?
Well, they did very well. Steve Jobs, a visionary, somebody who will take bold moves, and have insanely great products. And then when he passed away, here comes Tim, and Tim, his focus is as somebody who is controlling the supply chain, operation strategist. So I can just simplify the history of the two prominent CEOs of Apple, that Steve Jobs created the engine, and Tim made that engine as a global machine where everybody heard about it. Just few numbers, Greg. We have 2.5 billion devices actively of Apple, including all the devices. 1.5 billion of them is the iPhone. Every year, 2025, Apple made about $400 billion. Half of it is coming from the iPhone. So there are actually some kind of milestones in the history of Apple that it really mimic the technology. We hear about the word saying the iPhone moment, which is the moment that can change the industry. This is all created by Apple.
Yeah, some staggering numbers that you just gave us, Ahmed. Anytime someone sees success, you're going to have critics. And critics have said Apple has shifted from innovation to iteration, no longer seeking that groundbreaking change and falling behind with new technology. Do you think that criticism is valid in 2026?
It is valid to a certain point. They have a lot of challenges, and I can give you 4 of them. Those challenges. One of them is the one you mentioned, which is the next innovation. Everybody expected Apple to come up with the next innovation. What we have seen is a focus not on the product, on the services. The services is now about 26% of the revenue of Apple, but they have more challenges. They have, for example, the AI race. They are really lagging in that. That's why hopefully in their coming conference in June, they can have an answer for that. They have the regulations because there is so many countries are suing them for monopoly. That will be one part of it, of looking at how can you really deal with that. All of these things are really part of what Apple is saying. But the product itself, yes, there is improvement, but there is no major improvement where people say this is the next iPhone, this is the next product. The shift is different with the Tim Cook than with Steve Jobs.
Yeah, Ahmed, you talked about AI, new technology. In his letter, Tim Cook talks about, quote, being focused on building tomorrow. So what does the next 50 years look like for Apple, particularly in the world of AI and new technology that is sort of taking over the tech space?
The whole, there is a saying about Apple, Greg, that Apple always comes late to the party, but becomes the star of the party. And that's what happened with them. They look at any product. They don't reinvent the product. They actually redefine whole industries, whether it is the MP3s, which is the iPod, or talking about the iPhone. So for them to look at AI after 3 years after being introduced, in 2022, now they realize that it's here to stay. So for looking at AI, how it's going to be part of every single product of Apple, this is something that's in the plan. And the latest thing is about that agreement with Google about $1 billion so they can use Gemini. And now they're talking they're going to have it available all the agent, all the, like the ChatGPT and Gemini's and the others available for the users, so they can pick and choose whatever they want. So they realize that this is the future is for AI, at least for the coming 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah. Quickly here with about 30 seconds, Ahmed. I know I have lots of Apple devices and had many over the years. When you talk about the iPad, the MacBook Pro, the iMac when I was in school, is there a device that stands out to you from Apple that has been the most significant in your eyes in this space?
Well, I know I always fascinated by the first iPod. I watched the movie about Steve Jobs, and what he said in that movie very quickly is that I want 1,000 songs in my pocket. So when you're talking about minimizing and solving that product and making it so small so it can have it in your pocket, that was the beginning of thinking different. And this is why Apple in this situation now.
Yeah, well said. All right, Ahmed Banafa, technology expert, professor at San Jose State. Thanks so much for the insights, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you.